All right, so let's talk.
Extra six tail come in handy, trust me.
Let's talk Antaresia. Let's talk venomous. Let's talk geckos, monitors. You name it. You've pretty well kept it. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I've kept a lot of stuff. So yeah, I guess it might be a fair statement. I mean, lizards, geckos, monitors, dragons, skinks, good variety across the board. Then, venomous, kept venomous for a long period of time. I did mobile reptile educational shows, so that enabled me to keep crocodilians in New South Wales. And, I had a few freshies, salties, and then I did all my appropriate paperwork, and I was able to get alligators and boa constrictors as well, something no one else could actually get their hands on. So yeah, I guess I've been very spoiled.
That is something I did not know, that you were able to get those back in the day. Were they through an amnesty, or how'd you get your hands on them?
No, it was through my, so in New South Wales, you operate under the Department of Agriculture, the DPI, Department of Primary Industry. So, therefore, you are classified as a mobile zoo as such, which means you've got to comply to all the standards that a zoo complies to, as in caging, maintenance, all your maintenance and husbandry stuff, as well as, your dietary, educational component information, training. So you can't just turn around and go, I want to get a boa constrictor, I'm going to apply for a license, because it ain't going to happen. And so you're going to go through all those hoops. And then with the exotic stuff, there again, it took a lot of hard work. It took me, I'm pretty sure it took me around about 5 years to get the permits for the alligators and the boa constrictors. There was a whole list of stuff that I had. Then I've got to source them from, another zoo, basically. So some zoos don't want to give you stuff because you're a private guy, and they don't really look at private people. And some other zoos look at you as a competition, direct competition. So, they'll make it very hard for you to get your animals. So it was very difficult at the time, but it worked out, and I was able to get them, and I had them for quite a few years, and those animals were absolutely amazing for educational purposes.
Since you got to keep exotics, did you get to keep any tortoises as well, or did you have tortoises in the collection? No.
No, I was only allowed to keep what I applied for. So I had to apply for the animals. I had to tell them the cage sizes. I had to tell them everything else. They would assess that. It would go to a non-Indigenous vertebrate committee. So there was a whole committee of, really smart people that would sit down and go, is this a good idea giving this guy these animals? So they'd go through and assess all the paperwork, assess your criteria, and then, when and if they did approve you, where are you going to get the animals from, and then what's your disposal method? So there's always, how are these animals going to be housed after the event? It's not just, let him have the animals. It's, if you go bust, if you go broke, if you die, if something bad happens, what happens to these animals? The animals are going to be rehoused somehow. So even before you get approval to keep the animals, you've got to have approval. So basically you've got to work out an agreement where you get the animals from, that you give them back to them. So, they might say you've got to buy them, you use them for a couple of years, and then when you want to get rid of them, or when they hit their size restriction, you've got to give them back, and then you've got to try and find someone else. So it can be a bartering system, and, it can be difficult. So, it was one of those things, and I was able to work with it. And there was another guy, Ben Britton, who now runs the Wildcat Centre in Sydney. He was another guy who worked in the zoo industry. He actually had Burmese and alligators on his permit, so him and I both had something in common. And then basically I pulled out of the mobile education thing because my work commitments, as well as other things that were playing in the background, just really were wearing me down. So Ben went off, and he was the only guy left behind, and he was able to then turn his mobile zoo permit into a full-blown zoo. So he's got basically a good zoo collection now, and he's got tortoises. Lucky him.
Yeah, I'd love a tortoise. I've got to admit, I gave the license up for 3 years, and for 3 years I was very tempted to go to the dark side and get myself an exotic tortoise. But I'm glad I didn't, because I've come back to the light. I've got the license, doing everything above the board, and got some monitors and dragons going. So I'm glad I didn't go to the dark side. But I was very tempted. Just for a tortoise, though. I'm not sure why a tortoise, but for some reason a tortoise. I'd love a pet tortoise. Anyway, so cool. you gave all that up due to work commitments and whatnot.
Yep.
When did it decide to go from work to full time snake keeper breeder? Because you're a plumber, aren't you, by trade?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
I'm a plumber by trade, but for the last 20 odd years I've been doing large commercial roofing. So I've been doing basically every large shopping centre in the Sydney metro area, even Sydney International Airport. I did a lot of work on there. Then, you had the Olympics come through, so all the big rush to build all these giant things. I was part of that. And, early in my days, I was one of the crazy guys to get up, clamber up the steel structures, run across the steel and do all sorts of weird wonderful things. And towards the end of my time, I'm the guy that's coming out to the job, inspecting the job and doing the quality assurance and just being a project manager, and still, like if other guys were laying roof sheets or doing some work, I'd jump in and give them a hand because, number one, I still like to get back in and have a go. Number two, I don't like to see people struggle. And, it keeps me fit. I like to keep fit, I like to keep moving.
And then when...
So, it just got to the point where I was more of a babysitter, basically. I had 43 guys underneath me, and my job constantly was to keep an eye on them, manage personalities, manage everyone's problems. And it just sort of built up and built up and built up. And I think it was around about 2015, I think. I just sort of woke up one morning and had a premonition, and I just said, I'm done, I'm done doing this, and I really want to pursue the other part of it. And I've always kept reptiles for as long as I can remember in some shape or form. But obviously in the last, what are we in now, 2020? In the last 20 years, since we moved to where we are now, it's definitely off in a different tangent, prior to us moving where we are. I kept a lot of venomous, kept a lot of lizards. Venomous was just out of pure interest. Lizards was because of fascination. I did have pythons, so a lot of my older pythons I still have. Antaresia caught my eye in the sort of early 90s, so I stuck with that. And, I was swapping guys like Jared Sharp. I was swapping him bloody black-headed pythons for maculosus, some spotted pythons. And he's just like looking at me, shaking his head, going, "You're crazy, you're crazy. You're swapping." Black-headed pythons back in the mid-90s was like $2,500. Here I'm swapping these guys because I could breed these, and I had them. I want to trade this for 3 or 4 max, and this guy's like, "You're crazy. These things are only worth a couple $100." But to me, that's what I was interested in, and I was happy to do those trades, And I always think I'm very fortunate because I was lucky to fall in with guys like John Montgomery, Peter Krause, Rob Porter, all these really good guys that really have a high standing in the hobby already. And I got to learn different things about the hobby and progress before it became, a hobby really, in New South Wales anyway. So, it's definitely gone off at a different tangent for me. And, everyone sees what I have now. And the reality is everyone gets to come into my collection twice a week. I don't know how many other reptile keepers do that, It's me and my wife that do all the cleaning and feeding and everything. And, it is what it is, it's my collection, and I love my animals.
That's what I found back when I was YouTubing. Prior to YouTubing, the hobby was very open and everyone was going into everyone else's collection, and quarantine and whatnot wasn't really a big thing. And then quarantine kicked in and no one was allowed in anyone else's room. And that's what I found with YouTube, and was a way to still stay in contact with people, invite people in to show them what you were doing, what you're working on. And that's, I loved it. I got to tell you, I got addicted to it from when I got sick and gave everything up. That was what I missed the most out of all the reptiles and all that sort of stuff was going around to other reptile keepers' houses, talking to them, looking at how they do stuff, looking at their collection, looking for different tricks or tips that they might do that I can take home and put into my collection. That was what I missed the most. So
yeah, definitely. And like you say, it's an opportunity to showcase your collection to a greater audience that would never normally get to see your animals. Because let's put it quite blunt, guys in Western Australia or in America, how often are they going to come to Australia and get to see your collection? Probably never, you know. So it's a great way you can showcase your collection. It gives you verification that, you know, you do have a cool collection and you're going in the right direction and you're working on some really cool animals. But also, you know, why shouldn't we be proud of what we do? Like, you know, I'm proud of my animals. I love my animals. You know, would I keep them if they're worth $1? Yes, and I prove that. You know, like, if my animals don't sell, they stay here forever. This is their forever home. I don't, you know, do I really want to sell animals? And people will say, oh, he's hard to deal with. He doesn't really want to sell his animals. No, not really. No, I'm happy to hang on to them.
I remember I had a sale one time, a guy,
you know,
he wanted yearling albino olives. I had none for sale. And he kept pestering me, yeah, I want some yearling albino olives. And after 3 or 4 messages of saying I got none for sale, I sent him a message back saying, no, 15,000. And he went off saying, you know, that's too much, yada, yada, yada. Because I don't want to friggin' sell them. You know, you are going to have to pay to get them out of my hands. I do not want this sale. And I did not know how else to put that through to the guy than to put an extra 5,000 on what these snakes were kind of worth. But, guy had more money than brains, so...
Yeah, it can be hard at times. I mean, you know, it is good to sell animals because we all need to produce animals to sell, to make money, to pay, to feed, to house, to heat, to clean, all the other animals. That doesn't happen for free, trust me. And I mean, if you go to work in a normal job and you have an hourly rate, why can't you have the same hourly rate working from home? And you've got to really bring that into context. And you and I were speaking today about, do the animals pay for themselves? You know, the animals need to recuperate, regardless of what business it is. They need to recuperate their expenditure. And I mean, it's like all farming, and the hobby should be no different. You know, like everyone wants to buy a couple of animals. Everyone wants to experience breeding their animals, but no one wants to admit that they're doing it just because they want the money, or, you know, they want to go to an expo and be a breeder and all that. You know, like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just to be open and honest about it, you know.
I was lucky. I had a reputation for breeding olives. Now, I didn't have the funding to go and get the albino olives, but I had enough nous to get those albino olives in my collection, with knowing I was good at breeding olives. So, you know, working out percentage deal, all that sort of stuff, I knew I could get albinos in the collection that way. And that opened up, extra funding. And I don't know why people whinge and bitch about people making money out of breeding snakes. When I started making money out of breeding snakes, that helped fund a magazine, that helped fund an expo, that helped fund a shop. You know, that helped fund the YouTube and all those toys. That wasn't cheap setting up. You know, I need a new laptop, camera, shotgun mic. You know what it's like, and they don't give that stuff away. Yeah,
goes on and on
software
and on.
gear, yada yada yada.
No. You can
so
try.
making
Making
coin out of snakes.
It's like driving into the servo.
Yeah, go, mate, go.
Yeah, it's like driving into a servo and going, you know, you mind if I just fill my car up and drive off, because, you know, I don't really want to pay for this, and you guys make a lot of money out of this, so you should be able to just give it to me. Unfortunately, you know, everyone has to pay their way, some shape or form, and
now,
you know, it is what it is. It's one of my favourite sayings. It is what it is.
One thing I ditched as soon as I become a professional snake breeder, I pretty well went away with mates rates. You know how when you come up through the hobby, you got mates rates and all that sort of stuff. As soon as I become a professional reptile breeder, I've done away with mate rates, and every time I had a mate hit me up, you know, for a couple $100 off a reptile, I said to him, well, that's like me just hitting you up for a couple $100 next time we go to the pub. You know, just give us a couple $100 because I want to drink it. I said, this is how I make my living to pay the bills and put food on the table for the kids and yada, yada, yada. You know, this is my job. I can't be doing that no more.
Yeah.
So did you, when you become a professional breeder, did you do away with like mates rates and stuff like that and become a little bit more professional with it, with that sort of side?
Well, what I did is I just remember the early days. So, you know, if you have good mates, you usually swap and trade between each other. So there was never any money involved. It was, you know, you want this, I'll give them to you. We can breed those, let me know. Maybe we can swap and trade. I still do a little bit of that. And I still do that with some good friends. And I like doing that. For me, that takes away the money value of it. And it brings me back to what it was all about. But the same thing, you know, if someone sends you a message and goes, I noticed you got that snake for sale. I noticed you want 500 for it. How about I give you 400? And you're just like, and then they send you question mark, and it's like, you're not even going to evoke a response. You know, I've got so many things that I'm busy doing, and I do apologise to people for not responding to everyone, but I get spammed with so much. It's incredible. And, you know, and it's usually the people that are trying to buy animals off me are the ones that I ignore. They're the ones that I shouldn't be ignoring, right? Because that's money. But they're usually the ones I sort of push aside. If someone rings me for advice or sends me a message for advice, I'll answer that. I'll sit there and spend 10, 15 minutes. If someone wants to buy a particular snake, I'm like, you know, I've got a website,
it's backwards,
whatever. But I should be responding to those guys as well. And yeah, it's a bit backwards to me, you know, and that's because, you know, my understanding is, you know, people that are suffering and their animals are going to suffer. You know, if they can't get the information, there's going to have a roll-on effect. If someone wants an animal, they're going to buy it off me, and if they're not happy, they'll just buy it off someone else anyway. And I guess, you know, that's not great customer service, but, you know, if they do buy an animal off me and there's a problem, oh yeah, I'll back that up all the way to the health because it's animal welfare, and, you know, it's all about the animal's well-being. So, but yeah, I've really got to work on that part, and that's the way I'm going to make it more profitable or make it more valuable for me to stay at home. So it's only been the last 5 years that I've really been staying at home on a full-time basis. And even then, in the last 5 years, I did 2.5 years of dropping back, doing part-time work, and did full-time work for another year. And I just went, you know what, done. You know, I'm too old to climb on roofs like a monkey anymore. I still can do it.
Nervous
but,
taking
I'm good at my trade, but...
Were you nervous taking the plunge into being a full-time breeder? Since they were only limited to an Australian market, we haven't got a global market. Was that scary for you to give everything up and say, this is it, this is what I'm doing for a living from now on? Most definitely. And then you look at the thing, like, yeah, I'm the dirt snake king, I call myself, because I guess, you know, we all need a great TV show. You know, watch out, Tiger King, here comes the dirt snake king. But in all reality, you know, I work with a particular species and I'm very successful with that. You know, how many children's pythons can you sell a year? And then how many years can you do that in a row and still make good money? You know, with such a small, isolated market. So, you know, you've really got to think about what you're doing sometimes. You know, like I say, I love the animals I work with, and probably not the greatest choice for making money. I mean, you look at the jags and the zebras and the granites. You look how the carpet pythons exploded and how much money was involved in those early days. You know, $10,000 for the first albino Darwins. You know, I almost got caught in that little train. But you know, I pulled back and went, hang on a minute. Yeah, it's attractive and it's nice, but I'm not really a carpet python guy. I have carpet pythons. I breed carpet pythons, but I wouldn't call myself an expert or a person to go to. You know, I have a good little variety of stuff, but, you know, it's not my thing. Dirt snakes, oh, yeah, I love them. I love them inside out, you know, back to front, upside down, and that's what makes it interesting to me because I'm constantly learning about the animals I love. So. And I always try and encourage people... I always try and encourage people to keep something that is only for pure interest, not for money, not for anything else, just pure interest. Pick something that's always fascinated you. And I'm glad to see that you're getting into lizards because, like you said before, you were never really into lizards.
And now you've cracked that shell. You've just gone, holy crap, there's a whole world here I've never seen or thought of before. And it's that true appreciation.
Yes,
you know,
and
that's awesome
about this time around. I'm wanting to do things with legs. Last time, the albino olives paid the bills, but I was a carpet python guy. I loved me carpet pythons, and the blackheads. They were the amount of money that I threw at those things, because they just eat those animals. But the olives paid the bills, so that was fine. But like you said, this time around, I wanted something totally outside of my comfort zone, something I'd never worked with before. And yeah, monitors, dragons, lizards, and yeah, let's start learning all again. And I'm having so much fun because it's all the stuff that I've never done the first time around, like not just keeping the lizards and the monitors, but keeping the crickets and learning how to breed the crickets, setting up the mealworms and learning how to breed mealworms, catching the grasshoppers with the kids. You know, when you're half blind, stuff like that. And like I think you said it. It might have been you. Yeah. Might have been. I can't remember. Someone said it, but yeah, as we're getting older, the ground's getting further and further away, and it takes longer to get up and down, and it's horrible. Yep. Anyway, I just brought up photo number 1 of one of your gorgeous albino spotted pythons. I believe it is. Yes. Oh, right. She's sitting on eggs. So I thought, as soon as they were talking about some of your critters, we better get some photos going. So that's pretty well what you were best. Alrighty, thank you. Mate, I just got before we get into showing off some of your snakes. I just got hot press report, whatever you want to call it. That's the one. That's the one. Fresh off the press, we got a hot report coming in. Vision racks. Now keep an eye out on Wednesday. I want to say head over to Reptiles Down Under. Keep an eye out on there for information on vision racks and maybe a price drop. So I'm hoping I read that out right. I double checked with the sponsors before the show if there was anything. And they no, nothing yet, and they had a few problems this week like the rest of us, and yeah, just running this one down to me. So
yeah. Well, hopefully they've allowed for the Australian dollar and for freight, because it can be tricky importing stuff, as I have learned.
Have we even cracked the 70 cent mark yet? Where are we sitting? I think last I seen we were sitting.
I think we're still sitting at about.
That's last I seen. We're pushing on 66, and there's yuck. Because I know you look at that stuff for your American trips and whatnot as well. So yeah,
have to take all that into consideration. But more importantly, let's talk about Andalusia.
Let's get on to number 1. That was an albino. I had that sitting up there for a bit. I'm not sure if you could see that. I had that up there for a bit, but an old girl sitting on eggs. Number 2. Now that's a girl maternally incubating, is it? You got a tent gun there at 29 degrees.
Yes. So that's so obviously when we keep these animals in captivity, you know, we want 100% success rate, and it's not always the way, but we bust our chops doing it, you know. And the early 90s is sort of, well, the late 80s, early 90s is when we actually first recognised that we could breed these animals in captivity. Up until then, people were keeping animals. 1 or 2 guys would, you know, magically pick up an animal that was full of eggs and it would lay eggs, and they did a captive breeding. So we learned a lot in those very first years, and then it wasn't until we learned that, you know, the animals need to cool to actually go into cooling cycles to help produce sperm. Females will then, you know, go into ovulations and all stuff like that. So it wasn't until sort of the mid-90s that we started learning this stuff, as you would have known, because you would have had a bit of experience with Kel Worley, who's another great python breeder from back in the day. And then, you know, you go to the flip side, you know, incubation, looking vermiculite used to be the medium of choice, and perlite was the secondary one, and then you could do a combination of both. And I don't know about you, but back in the old days, I used to get ice cream containers, put the vermiculite in there, get the lid of the ice cream container, cut a hole in the window, put the Glad wrap on top, and click it on top like a madman. and then you put it in your homemade incubator, which typically was just a box or a styrofoam box or whatever with a couple of light globes on either end. And every day you'd go in there, open it up, and you'd fan it religiously, giving the oxygen exchange and making sure that all this was happening, and then if you're lucky, you get to 60-odd days and you're blessed to have something to hatch.
I come along just after that, when refrigerators were getting converted into incubators. So, I come along a couple of years after you.
Yeah, so that's high tech. High tech for us. Very high tech. But back in those early days, you start learning things, like you look at the eggs and then you start realizing, the medium's too moist, you're getting a lot of mold outbreaks, you're getting condensation on the lids dropping down on the eggs, causing little windows or little snowflake sort of shapes, and that can kill the eggs. And then I just sort of, towards the 98, so I bred my first spotted pythons in around about 1998. And, Spot was, everyone knows my mate Spot that I got in 96, and I got a female for him that was hatched in 96 as well. So he's hatched in 95. So, basically he's a 20-odd year animal with his girlfriend. So I put those guys together, bred them in 1998, got my first eggs. I wasn't really, I had other things in my incubator. I was into lizards, so I had, I had the southern rainforest dragons, I had water dragons, I had bearded dragons, I had central netted dragons, and I know you want them, so just chill. I had mountain dragons, I had, pictus, like painted dragons, and I also had things like Collette's black snake eggs, and I had some diamond python eggs, which I highly prized, and all this sort of that stuff. And these guys sort of got pushed aside, and I went, I'm not really ready. And then, she laid them, wrapped around them. I wasn't really checking on her as much as I should. And a week later, I noticed that she was sitting in this little bowl in the back corner. I'm like, oh no, what have I done? It's too late. They're all dead. And I thought, no, I'll just let this journey continue. And that's where the learning continues, and it opens your mind, and you start looking at these animals. And that's where you realize, basically, there's not much moisture involved in this incubation technique that they're doing. And if you watch them, they move around. And I do it a lot more now. Like, I've been doing it every year since, and I do it 1 or 2 clutches. But for the last 3 years, I've been doing a lot more clutches, more maternal incubation than not. And that was because of the albino project, to try and strengthen the genes, and hopefully that the incubation, taking the whole incubation out of the equation, to prove that the incubation temperatures weren't the issue here when we're talking about the genes and how they're kinked. So I went down that road, and then basically this picture that we've got here depicts the temperature that they will pick to lay their eggs. So regardless of what the heat gradient is in the enclosure, you could be 28 at the front, 36 at the back. The female will sit on the heat all the time like a heat hog. She'll go to lay the eggs, but when she wants to lay the eggs, she'll move away from that heat, and she'll find somewhere about 29 to 30 degrees, right about that. And then she'll just, if there's a hide box there, it's great. If there's a water bowl there, not so great. But if that's the temperature they want, they will dump their eggs in that spot, and then they'll wrap around them and sit there. And that's one of the things I've learned.
Incubation time at 29 degrees, maternally incubating with the Antaresia. What are we looking at there? High 50 days, or?
So normally, normally in an incubator, we can get them to hatch in about 41 to 43 days. I think it's the best I've had. But outside the incubator, if they're a consistent temperature, then you can get very similar. You can get about 46 to 50 days. But in its worst case scenario, 55, maybe 10 to 12 days longer. But really not a problem. I back in the early days, I kept a lot of data because I'm a very analytical guy. I did a lot of work with a lot of academics. So I was involved in a lot of academic studies, going out into the rainforest, catching lizards, weighing, doing morphometrics and pushing thermometers up bums of lizards and stuff like that, which we probably shouldn't say. Sorry, kids. But all that sort of stuff came into, just makes me hungry for more information. So, from day dot, I would see how many eggs I've got. I'd weigh the female, weigh the egg mass, and you go, okay, this is sort of a correlation. And, all that information slowly over time acquires into this great pool of data, egg sizing, lengths, diameters, weights of each individual eggs. And I mean, you guys, carpet guys and olive python breeders, you guys are so friggin' spoilt. I mean, pulling eggs apart is so easy. When you're pulling these Antaresia eggs apart, especially Perthensis and Pygmy Bandeds, man, I tell you what, it's the most nerve-wracking thing in your life. Worried about these eggs tearing, the rest of it. And that's just so that you can weigh and measure the egg and then put it in the box, and number it, and off you go.
Cover before I forget them. One, if you tore an egg, how would you fix it up? Would it be liquid paper? Would it be a bit of tape? How would you, if you tore an egg open when you're separating them, how would you fix the egg up?
I used to use wax.
Candle wax?
A few guys would use wax, but you got to watch dropping hot wax on there. You're increasing, boom. You could cause hemorrhages and stuff. So early on, I would use that, and then had mixed sort of results. I wasn't really happy with standing there with a candle dropping wax. So there again, you can get a little bit of Glad wrap, cut a little square, and just stick it over. And once that exposed albumin starts to become tacky, it just sort of adheres, and you don't really get a bacterial infection at all. As long as the medium's pretty dry, a little bit drier, it doesn't hurt.
Maternally incubating, the reason why I like to artificially incubate, well, when I was back breeding them, was as soon as I got the eggs off the female, that meant the sooner I could get food back into her, which meant I could start prepping her for next year's breeding season. If you're maternally incubating and it goes that little bit longer, is your female still able to back up the next year to breed again, or do they have the 12 months off?
Yeah, they will breed again, and I've got a couple of females there that have done it for 5 years in a row, and so the data says it can be done, but you got to be smart about it. You don't see a snake sitting on eggs and then go, I'm going to feed it, because when a snake grabs and constricts, it forgets all about the eggs being there. It'll just constrict your egg pile too. So, sometimes you got to wait for the snake to come off the eggs, or you find the snake moving around the tub, having a drink, getting some moisture and stuff like that. You can feed the snake on the eggs sometimes, depending on the snake. You got to know a bit more about the personality of the animal. But whenever I'm feeding a female sitting on eggs, I always feed them a half-size food item, something just to get in the system, get a little bit of recovery going on. And once those eggs hatch, I tell you what, once those eggs hatch, I don't bother with mice. I just hit them with the, the hopper rats. The hopper rats put the weight back on them real quick, And I think I've said this a million times, 26 good feeds in between laying eggs and the next season, and you'll consistently keep producing animals, good quality animals. And it's good recovery for the females.
So a little tip here from Darren Boswell. He, like a lot of us, he likes to keep a lot of his reptile eggs, so he keeps some of his eggs from last year as well. And if he's got one that's laid this year and separating them, and it tears a bit, he just cuts a bit of shell out from last year's egg and puts that on. And there seems to
that's a good idea.
So something I've never heard of.
It's a great idea. I just when you maternally incubate, you don't separate the eggs anymore, so I don't tear too many eggs anymore. But I mean, the same instance, if you're there when they're dropping eggs, then you're right, you're on the hot spot. But if you tear an egg, then you can be in some serious trouble.
Yeah.
Great tip, Darren.
I've moved on to the next photo. It's another girl wrapped up on a clutch of eggs. Looks like she's maternally incubated as well. They look like they're sucked in and whatnot. So it's another spotter python.
Yeah, if you actually look in between the two coils on the right hand side of it, you'll see a little head popping out.
Oh, yep.
So that's the eggs hatching. So a lot of people say, how do you do it? And I've done shows on it, but basically what I do is I get the sphagnum moss, I moisten it up, I give it a good squeeze, drain as much moisture out. I'll put that in with the female once she's had a pre-lay shed. So, pre-lay shed to egg deposition can be 2 to 3 weeks. She'll get in there, she'll sort of move it around, push it and shape it the way she wants it. Within 3 weeks, that basically sphagnum moss is dry, which is so it's just a dry, but she's already got sort of the basis of where she is. She's happy with it. It can form a bit of coverage to make her feel secure, and she'll lay the eggs in there, wrap up around them, and just sit there. The females will move off the eggs to drink. You'll actually notice them drink, and then sometimes they'll sort of cruise through the water and then go back to the eggs, and they sort of go back and coil around the eggs and sort of wrap around until they feel comfortable, and then sit there again. And what they're doing is transferring some moisture back to the eggs. So you will get, the eggs will look a little bit crappier than they will in an incubator, and that picture there is a good example of how much they sort of dry up and how much moisture they lose. But like all eggs, when it comes time to hatching, the eggs magically will separate. They sort of disengage. No longer is that sticky glue stuff adhering anymore. It could be if we could find out what that is, it would be the greatest super glue in the world. But the only problem is if we put it to something together and they go to hatch, they'll just pop apart. Who knows what's causing there? It's obviously something to do with the gas exchange going on in that last development part of the egg in the embryo, and that sort of they disengage, they become very thin, pliable, and then obviously, they tear out. And through that, just maternal incubating, I've found that I have a higher success in incubation. So more babies survive. They come out bigger, stronger, more robust. And with some of these deleterious genes, as in the albinos and that, they typically come out more viable, so a lot stronger, more robust, and more willing to feed.
That's promising.
So
right. So moving on to the next photo.
Yeah.
Now I've got, looks like a mixed bag. I can see.
Yep.
Looks like a stripy one. There's a skinny in there, platinum. Looks like just a dirty grey big mixed bag, mate.
Mixed bag of awesomeness. So, basically this is where I'm throwing down the gauntlet to you carpet python breeders. The dirt snakes might have taken, we may have taken a little while to catch up, but trust me, when we have such natural, and this is an example of natural beauty really, but we've got such a great ability to find these goods, at our fingertips. These are some of the earlier stuff that we were working with until, all the recessive genes popped up in the antereges. So, and trust me, there's codoms are coming. There's some codom stuff coming. And it'll blow your socks off.
Folks. There you
go,
folks.
I believe so. I believe so. And well, Colin Ray's going to take a bit of a bow for that. He's already got one out of the bag, and it's good to see that he's gone through the process of eliminating. And I guess after this year's results, he'll definitely confirm what he believes. But I reckon he's got a codom gene there, so we'll see how we go.
I just want to read something here, mate. It's from Natasha Mills. I'm still a newbie and I've been doing a bit of research on black-headed pythons, and I'm finding a mix on the info about feeding. Some say don't feed bigger than mice. Some say it doesn't make a difference. Can you clear this up? I know you used to work with them. Well, you still work with black-headed pythons, Peter?
Yeah, I've got some black-headed pythons there, and I got one there that I bred in 1996, and she's a nice, big, robust animal, and I feed her big food items, but I don't feed her a lot of food items, so, and I know, is she a breeding animal? Not really. I don't she's just an enjoyment animal. I've got a couple other blackheads there. Maybe I'll breed those, but when it comes to producing on a regular basis, that's up to someone like yourself in Denver to answer those questions. I've bred them a couple of times over the years, but really haven't gone crazy about them.
They feed bigger than mice. Now, to me, I'm assuming she's talking hatchling, and as soon as you can get it on the rats, go nuts. But
more beneficial.
We used to chop ours up a bit with, we'd go rats, and then every now and then it'd be chicken necks or turkey necks or something, quail or something like that. Every now and then, we'd spice it up a bit. It wasn't always rats, but we never fed big fatty rats. We always kept our rats under the 200 gram mark for the big snakes because of that fatty liver disease. So I always used to like to feed off lean rats, but I'd like to chop it up with chicken necks and turkey necks and all that sort of stuff as well. Just change it up really.
I think back in the early days, people used to grow their own rats in the back shed and cut as many corners as they could. They'd feed their rats dog food, kibble, and God knows what else. And unfortunately, dog food has very high fat content and then obviously very high protein. And when that transfers to things like rodents, you're causing some problems in the rodents, which really isn't a big problem because they're just feeders, right? But unfortunately, that high fat content then goes to your snake. It accumulates, and you end up with fatty liver syndrome. So you get a lot of fat building up on the liver, and the liver can't break it down in its natural way. So therefore, you'd have all these big black-headed pythons dropping off the radar with this fatty liver syndrome. And Bob Whitty was a guy that, basically brought all this out in the open back in the mid-90s and said, this is what we've been doing, this is what's happening, this is wrong, we need to change. So, and I know Bob and Kel were really good friends, and there's a great relationship, where people share information back in the early days too, it's awesome. So once again, like Troy said, mice, get them off the mice, especially those bigger animals. They do benefit from rats very quickly.
From the past, I wasn't lucky enough to meet him. Like you said, I was lucky enough to meet Kel Worley, and he was good. He shared a lot of info, and him and Bob were really good mates. So I got to hear a lot of info and a lot of stories through Kel about Bob. But I think people forget back when you and I, you started before me, but we started, pre-Facebook and all this sort of stuff. It was a good time and a bad time. So our new modern times got its time and place, I reckon. I think it's good that we're so openly connected, but I miss the intimacy of the old days, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. The face-to-face value is definitely far better than this internet sort of stuff. And, that was before the APS, where everyone had the little pseudo name that they hid behind or exposed themselves. And then Facebook came along and pushed those things aside. And, there's all these layers. And at the end of it and behind it all is, all these guys that started the hobby basically, which, I still look up to and respect because they're so humble.
Brian Barnett, there's another one. I remember talking to Brian once, and he was telling me an amazing story that they used to go and buy electric blankets and pull the heat cord out of the electric blankets to warm up the snakes and stuff like that. Peter Krause telling me, they'd go herping, they'd make sure they've always got a couple of fake plastic snakes to put in the middle of the road because you knew Rex Stock was only an hour behind him or something and stuff like that. Moved on to the next photo, so I've got photo number 5 up. Now, again, this is a big mixed bag, but on the next level. Next level indeed. Go.
So obviously, this has got a fair few representations of the recessive genes that we're working with. So the albino gene in the spotted python. You got T+, T positive, caramel albino in the children's, and the 2 in the stimmy. You got platinums in there. You got a bit of everything. There's even there's a bit of everything in there.
Is there a paradox in there?
Sorry,
a paradox.
There's what? Yeah, there's a paradox. Paradox T+ in there. Yeah, and I mean that's another cool thing that's just popping up out of random. So just like the carpets, it's popping up in the Antaresia, and there's even paradox albinos too. So it's pretty amazing what's come through.
Good one. Well,
it's just a great. I mean, when you see them like that, it really makes
I remember seeing Jay Brewer's photos of the retics like that. He'd do a retic photo like that, and you just look at it and think, one day here in Australia we'll have something like that, and there it is. I'm not sure how old that. Well, I'm not sure how old that photo is, but we're getting there, and the carpets they might have hit. fast and whatnot. But I don't think the race is over, man. I'm not sure if it's going to be hare and tortoise sort of a story with the Antaresia and carpets, because the Antaresia are coming thick and fast at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few guys out there working really doing a lot of different projects. And I mean, they're looking at the combination stuff. It's the same again with the carpets in the early days. They're looking at, the double and triple gene and quadruple gene combinations, trying to produce the first animals. So it's only going to be, I reckon this year we're going to see a few more double combinations. We might even see a triple combination this year. We don't know, But there's quite a few guys out there working pretty good. I mean, Dave Evans, there's Marty Berhaglia, Colin Ray, just to name a few, And then there's a lot of younger fellas coming through too, like the young fellas, Unreal Reptiles. There's Jake and Eden. They're really doing some outstanding stuff. And I mean, there's, not to be biased, but there's so many guys out there working with these, which is awesome. And it really gives me some verification. When we wrote the book back in 2013 about children's pythons, and they're like, it's something a little bit different. With the guys who did the carpet python book, Nick and Justin, and it really sort of pushed the point that the children's pythons there's some cool stuff here, and it's just going to get so much better. And in the next 5 years, that's nearly 7 years ago now. Well, it is 7 years. So the next 5 years, we're still going to see the fruits of all that hard work.
So what you're saying is there's going to be another children's pythons book another couple of years down the track? Yeah.
I would envisage, yes. Well, I would say so, yes.
It's going to be outdated in a couple of years the way that you guys are going.
Or more revised.
So...
Yeah, well, a lot of the stuff that we were working back on prior to the book, some of the genetics, we weren't really sure of how it was working, or, if it was codom, if it was recessive, or whether it was polygenic. So we weren't really sure about it. So since then, I know what I've been doing, my work, and I know how I can prove things out, and I can backtrack it all. So, through my results, I can now say that, it's now proven to be this because of this, this, and this results.
Amazing.
Now, and here it is,
I come so close to that feeling. Sorry, keep going.
No, you did. I know what you're saying. It's so difficult to do that. And, I guess for the Antaresia, we're lucky. 18 months, you've got a sexually mature animal. As long as the males are 100 grams, females are 250, you're going to produce some eggs. But with carpets, you could be 2 to 3 years, depending on how you hit or miss. And then that's only if they cycle. If they don't cycle, you could be 30 years.
That's
crazy.
Boy. He was a lazy bastard. He was fat and lazy.
Yeah.
And it was impossible to get him to breed. And I was lucky to get the ones that I did get. And I only used him over virgins. And so they were, they were excitable, but they didn't know what they were doing half the time. So they weren't much help. And you throw another male in to try and spare him up, and they just have her, But anyway, that's I got to like 96% there, as in I was happy enough, but I didn't produce. I didn't get to breed the offspring together. I got to do the F1 back cross, and I got to see the results. And to me, right, I can call it comfortably when I'm going to sell this project. I can sell it comfortably knowing the results. But again, I only had one clutch and a small number.
Yeah.
I never got a big clutch, and I never got to do offspring to offspring to really 100% cement it, where Jared's been able to do that. So, lucky bugger.
Yeah, and that's the hard part too, is making sure that you get the numbers that are going to satisfy the, all the naysayers basically. So, if you get a clutch of 2 or 3 because you've struggled or you crack them early or the rest of it, the results might skew your overall data, because the next year you might get 20 and hang on, how did I miss that? And I got that back then. And so, it's a little bit difficult, but if you do a couple of out crossings, then, it's regardless. No one can, and you can reproduce those things on a regular basis, then, you know exactly what's going on.
For me to call it was I done the F1 back cross and only 4 eggs come through. I only managed to get 4 eggs to hatch. Yeah. And what made it hard was I didn't get the wild type. I got 4 entries, or 4 possible entries. For me, it's I don't know if entries are the right word for the mutation, but it's definitely something. But yeah, I got four visuals and no wild type, and I wanted that. I wanted that wild type to really cement in that yes, these are the visuals, because I could only guess what the visuals were going to look like as hatchies. When this boy come to me, he was fully grown.
That's right.
So yeah, anyway,
yeah.
Makes it I moved on to the next photo, and it's a very looks like a very clean looking spotted albino spotted from hatchie, and then again as a yearling, I'm assuming, or 18 months, something like that. Is that correct? Or
yeah, that's right. So basically, with the albino stuff, it's quite amazing how much they change in a year. As in colour and pattern, and I see a lot of people in a rush to breed these things and sell them. That's great. You make your money back on your project and all the rest of it. But then, a year later, you see the animals and you kick yourself. So, it's a difficult thing. But like I said, I like looking at a lot of pretty cool things. So, and that's just that animal was like an orange animal with purple on it, and then you look at it now and it's white contrast, and sort of really high contrast. He's going to shed soon, and when he sheds, I tell you what, that thing is it's probably the pride of my fleet. That there puts a lot of hard work into one picture, really, because that stripe stuff is a polygenic, so that's a line bred gene that I did. Took me 10 years to produce a nice full lined animals, and then I was out crossing the albinos, and what else can I use to try and increase strength and vigor in this line? Well, I know the stripe stuff's pretty good because I've been working with that for so long, so I chucked that in, not thinking that this would be any chance of a result. And I produced some 50% hets, grew them up, just picked two of those because they were close enough to the right size, chucked them together, and boom, this guy pops out. He was the first one out, crawls out of the egg. He was snappy like a normal Mac. Offered him food, he was straight on the food and never looked back, and it was just like, wow, what happened there?
So
it was like winning the odds.
No kinks down towards the tail or anything. He's a nice perfect boy.
Beautiful.
God,
no kinks anymore.
You got to feel good about that.
As I used to joke, I've ironed all the kinks out of the project now. So.
Well, you helped me a lot with the albino olives. But I remember I was talking to you years ago and complaining about the amount of kinks I was getting, and you asked me how incubation temp, and I told you I was going low because I read with albinos you're supposed to go low, and you advised go a little bit higher, and that you found by going higher you've got our healthier, stronger animal sort of thing, more robust, yada yada yada. And I'd done that one year, and bugger me, I'd done it just for one clutch, and then the next year both incubators got set at 31.5, and I think 31.5 minimum. I think we pushed it up to 32.2 or 32.3. So we give it a fluctuation of that.
Yeah, I mean that's where it comes back to looking at these animals sitting on eggs. Depending on your room setup and the cages set up. If you get a 45-degree hot day, the temperature in your room will probably get higher. That means the temperature where these eggs are sitting will get higher. And then you watch what the females do. The females will sort of, let go of the coils a bit and open up a bit to help air the eggs a bit more. So it's a constant learning thing. And then you temp gun them. You're like, oh my God, how did it get so hot in here? And you temp gun them. And you're like, how the hell are those eggs still around 30 degrees? Like, what the hell? Is there like a magic juice in the air? So it's the learning thing. And like you said, I tried the higher temperatures to try and get the kinks out of the albino project. That didn't seem to be working. And that's where I thought outcrossing, because I spoke to a lot of guys in the US. So the outcrossing was a big thing. And then maternal incubation was the final thing that I did to try and prove that it wasn't a temperature thing. It's really the outcrossing. And it really is the outcrossing. And I mean, I can incubate them now or maternally incubate them and get the same results now, which is awesome.
We're doing the outcrossing at the same time as as the incubation temps went up. So it was both things lining up at the same time. I think there was the stronger bloodlines coming in from the outcross animals coming back, being put with other outcross animals, plus incubation temps going up. It has just gone from bad to bad to bad to amazing in one season. Yeah.
Yeah, which is awesome. That's a great result, you know. Like that's what it's all about.
Yeah. I just want to double check through some comments. First, just wanting pets and not breeding our ants. Does it hurt to not push the feed into them, just to let them mature in their own time? Now that's from an M Brian or Brain, however you say that. Sorry, M. I'm not a linguist with names, but yeah, that's for you, Pete.
Yep.
Yeah, can they just let the food with food? Do they have to push them along or what?
I mean, I know a lot of guys, and I used to do it back in the early days, you know, to get the results that I wanted as quickly as possible. You would feed the girls pretty heavy, you know, and get them up to the size. Is that beneficial long term? I don't think so, you know. Like, if you've got animals 5 years plus, I'm going to say they're going to start, their reproduction is going to start to drop off. But so that's from a breeder's point of view. But as from a pet's point of view, the first winter usually is the scariest winter for any breeder when they sell an animal, especially for anyone buying an animal, because, you know, they've got their cage sitting on, you know, their mid-20s and it's doing fine, it eats, and then the first time it doesn't eat, it's a major catastrophe, or the animal eats and then regurges because the cage, the nighttime temperatures drop too low. 9 times out of 10, all your problems with the antaresia comes down to incorrect temperatures.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if your temperatures are way too hot, the animal will be aggressive, like super aggressive. But the beauty of that is it'll eat and 3 days later it'll crap. You know, that's great if you're a breeder and you don't care getting bitten 20 times. But if you're a keeper, then, you know, just make sure that the temperatures are up, feed them once a week, as long as they're eating once a week. If they don't eat every week or every second week, it's no stress. These things eat, you know, once every 3 or 4 months in a while if they're lucky.
To feed when they're coming up for a shed.
So,
do you feed when they're coming up for a shed?
Oh, no, I learnt the hard way. I've done that before, and then you have animals that are halfway through a shed. The shed gets stuck. They've got the food stuck. It all turns into a giant, you know, storm of horrors. And then you come back, and the worst case scenario is sitting right in front of you. So if you know it's shedding, avoid. Any
newbies, when it's coming up for a shed, it's best not to feed. I've got just a good one here from
just wait till
I've got a good one here from Jeremy Noble for you. Just saying that he's picked up a ton of info since chatting with you. So I thought that was a nice comment.
Thanks. I mean, I'm always happy to share information. I live a busy life. I should make it easier, but I don't. I make my life harder. You know, it's crazy.
Cups is going through, just answering a few people. Cheers, Cuppa. Yep.
Good work, Cups.
Ems is just thinking, Deb and Joe, your gorgeous wife's been answering a few questions, so thank you, Joe. So, right.
Smarts of the outfit.
Oh, it's good having a good wife, isn't it? I love it.
Yes.
All right, pushing on the next photo, number 8. Now, is this your walk-in incubator?
Yep. Yes, that's my walk-in incubator. So, at my peak, I thought I was the smartest guy in the world, and I did like 108 or 110 clutches. Right. You know, and I'm pretty sure there was a clutch of olives in there. There was a clutch of roughies. I think there was a clutch of Darwin carpets, some geckos, some monitors, but the rest of them were antaresia, you know. And as the dirt snake king, you know, I love them. I breed them, and I breed a lot of them. But the problem is, obviously, when you breed them, you got to house them, and then that comes into the next picture. You know, you got to house them, you got to keep them, you got to establish them, and not all of these guys want to eat when you want them to eat, and that can be a real firestorm. You know, I was very lucky. I've got a good friend who's got a great, a lot of experience in the hobby. Cindy Jackson.
Beautiful.
She comes from the zoo industry. Worked at Snake Ranch, the old Snake Ranch, for a long period of time, and you know, we were able to do a lot of things, you know, get all these animals feeding and established really quickly and easily. Her experience and my experience just complemented, and we work really well together. So let me just tell you this: I haven't done it again since. This year I'll probably breed a few clutches this year, but yeah, I'll definitely be a little bit more cautious of where I tread. My workload is going to really be a bit more evened out.
All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Favourite? Yeah. I got a question from Aidan Maxfield. Your favourite? What's the favourite lizard that you're keeping at the moment?
I would still say my blue tongues, just my normal eastern blue tongues. I've got a couple of blueies there. You know, I acquired in the early '90s, like '93, '94. So they're my favourites anyway. Yeah, I think they're just great. I mean, monitors are absolutely amazing. Very close second, the monitors. The small monitors have got just as much attitude as the big monitors. The difference is, when the big ones grab you, you've got a lot of stitches. When the little ones grab you, everyone laughs. You know, it's a great day.
I got to admit, I'm enjoying them. I find them so interactive, so curious. Always watching. So I've moved on to the next photo, and that's you housing them. You housing 800 odd.
Yeah, Now
I got to admit, I love the YouTube clips that you do when you walk from room to room to room. I love that stuff, man. I get blown away. You can see so much time and effort and thought has gone in to your reptile rooms. I love them. So
I appreciate that. I mean, it's my man cave. It's my place to get away, but it's also a work area too. So, you know, constantly trying to evolve and make myself better as a keeper, taking on new concepts, trying new stuff. And also talking with other keepers and seeing what works for them, and maybe that'll work for me. I mean, I get a lot of friends in Europe and the US that breed a lot of the dirt snakes, you know, and they've got problems establishing and feeding or getting this or doing that, and they're like, how do you do this? How do you do that? You know, and I'm happy to share the information, because one day I'm going to need information back off them, and, you know, that constant sharing is what it should be about, building a strong base. And, you know, it just really affirms the work that you do is respected everywhere.
We're a community. Cool. Well, we're supposed to be a community.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, so.
Yeah, and I always believe, you know, I'm no better than anyone else. I might have a little bit more experience, but I should be approachable and, you know, easy to talk to like everyone else, because that's the only way we're going to get the information barrier, you know, and get it out there.
Well, I was a big believer. The more people breeding, the more chance of a new mutation popping up, so the more everyone can enjoy. So yeah, that was my thoughts towards it anyway. I've just moved on to the last photo, and that's the book, The Complete Children's Python. So that was...
so that just basically it reaffirms all the work and dedication that you spent on something that you admired and loved and enjoyed, because you had loved and enjoyed it. And then somewhere along the line, you know, I've known Justin since you've known him, basically, since we were at that conference up in Cairns. And I met Nick when he came to the other conference here in Sydney, and we were talking, and they're like, oh, you know, we're thinking we've just done this, because they just had the first carpet python book released, and it was getting released in Australia for the first time. And I spent a couple of weeks with these guys, these clowns, you know, and we went up to the territory chasing snakes like madmen, you know, which was awesome. Great experience.
That was with Rico, wasn't it?
We got talking Rico Walder, and there was another guy called Mark Spadaro. He was actually a Boland's python guy, and he still is, and I'm pretty sure he was the first guy to captive breed them in the US. So that just shows that field work, information and dedication can take you down some really awesome avenues. And I mean, I spoke to these guys, and they said, oh, you know, Justin tells me you've got some Antaresia. And I said, yeah, I've got a couple. And they're like, oh, yeah. And I said, well, they're actually laying eggs and sitting on eggs. And they're like, oh, yeah. And they come to my place for 3 days, I think, 2 or 3 days. And we did herping and all this other stuff. The first day they got here, I think I had 10 clutches dropped. And they're like, holy crap, this is out of control. And this is before I moved to that building that you see there, the new facility. And I think I produced 30 or 40 clutches that year. And they were here when I had 15 clutches dropped, you know, and they're like, oh my God, this is incredible. And then, you know, I just went through the process that I normally do. You know, I take the clutch, I weigh the clutch, And they're like, oh, why are you doing that? And I said, well, I've already weighed the female. Now I'm going to weigh her after the clutch so I can see how much energy she's put into producing these eggs. And they're like, okay. And then I'm separating the eggs. And they're like, what are you doing? And then I'm weighing and measuring them. And they're like, right. And then even in those days, I was numbering them. And then hopefully if I was there at the time when they hatch, I could actually catch the hatchlings and weigh the hatchlings as well. You know, really weird guy. You know, need a better lifestyle, need to get out more. But, you know, I was doing all this stuff, and they're like, okay. And then they're like, so how long have you been doing this? And I said, oh, you know, for 10 years. And they're like, really? And I went, yeah. And they said, show me your data. And I showed them the book. And they're like, holy crap, we need that. We need this. We need you. We're going to do this book on Antaresia. And we all sat down and went, okay, let's make this happen. How do we do this? And then we sort of broke it up into sections. We all had our own designed little sections, and then it all combined. And, you know, I reached out to John Weigel at the time because Cindy Jackson was working there. And they took some data for us in that last year prior to us doing the book. Nick and Justin put in some electronic temperature gauges in their clutches so that we could, you know, get some temperatures of maternal incubation. And we added all that in the book, and just all that information just came into this giant wad of context that we see in the book. It was amazing to see it when it all came out and spat out the other end. You know, we looked at like most of my adult females were between the 350 to 450 mark. Snake ranchers animals at the time were between 500 grams to 800 grams, very heavy animals. Then what we did was we compared reproductive output per animal, and my animals were producing more eggs, more viable eggs than snake ranchers animals, because once they got to a certain body weight, the reproductive output dropped off dramatically, and it just proved that what I was doing was more right than being a captive guy who's sitting there going, more food equals more eggs. Didn't work with the Antaresia.
No, I was always a believer, not so much more food, but new fat. So if you had old fat on that snake, that was no good.
Okay.
And that's what I found with a lot of the stuff I was working with. So if I was pumped a girl up for breeding and I didn't produce eggs from her, then I'd try and strip the weight off her and then put new fat back on her before breeding again. And that's what I found very successful. But if she was a fatter girl, she'd have the smaller clutch size. But if she was, you know, and if she was like always a constantly plump girl, always overweight sort of thing, you just got to wave a rat in front of it and it puts weight on. She'd always have small clutch sizes. But if I had a smaller snake and then March, April, May, bam, I'd put a lot of weight on her really quick, then I'd get a nice big clutch size. So yeah, I'm not sure if you found stuff like that.
Yeah, but what we got to remember too is I'm dealing with snakes under 500 grams with clutch sizes of 150 grams. You're dealing with snakes that can weigh up to, you know, like a big girl. I don't know what a big girl you would have, 8 to 10 kilos.
Mark,
you know, and they could lay a clutch of, you know, they could lay a clutch up to 2.5 kilos of eggs, because those eggs are quite big. You know, so instantly that female has lost a quarter of her body weight in egg production versus an animal that's lost, you know, a third of its body weight in egg production. So the Antaresias, you know, and I'm going to say the Antaresia are probably more of an active species compared to a big olive as well. So therefore they're continually burning off fat stores anyway. And there was an interesting study done by Bedford, of all people, about feeding small food items to big snakes to help break down or remove body fat, because they're still using the same energy to eat a big rat or a small rat. The difference is the small rat only replaces a small amount of the calories used to burn off. So therefore, you can use and I've heard you say it many times, stripping off the fat by using small food items. And that's exactly what this study proved.
Bedford was one that taught
That's right, and that's how this study proved it exactly, you know, that if you've got a big fatty animal and you're worried about it's not going to breed, feed it small food items, because it's going to work the same effort, if not a little bit more, to try and get its mouth around and try and get it down, and then it's going to have very little yield from that food item. So yeah, it's pretty amazing.
He's a good guy, that one.
So horses for horses. Yeah. So there again, you know, it's just one of those things. Knowing the animals that you're working with, and sometimes there's a correlation between us. Like sometimes there's a correlation of the stuff I do that can be transferred to Olives and vice versa. And then sometimes there's stuff that just doesn't. It doesn't cross over. You know, there's my information.
Yeah, one thing that you said that I liked was I like to weigh. I like to weigh pre-egg and post-egg laying, and I used to like weighing throughout the year as well, mainly in January and April. But that was because I wanted to see once she'd laid her clutch of eggs, and I got a weight off her, I knew exactly how much weight I wanted her to put back on, by January, and then exactly how much weight by April. So you could really gauge it that way. So that was I thought that was a really good tip that you put out there, that one. But weigh your snakes straight after the egg weigh. It's
just getting more in tune with the animals working. It's more in tune of getting in with the animals you work with. Yeah, it's just reading the animals, because some of these snakes, like the pygmy banded python, we found through all the information that that snake is one of the craziest snakes. You know, those females will drop between 50 and 80% of their body weight to egg reproduction, which is like you can imagine that animal doing that in the wild. It's basically saying, lethal. Well, I'm here to produce these eggs, and if I don't survive, that's okay. My job is done, which is crazy. And you look at all the other stuff, you're talking 30 to 40%, and then you got these guys living right on the edge, and you're like, that's crazy, And I've got a couple of guys in Europe, and they've sent me information, and they've said this female's just laid, and 70% of her body mass has gone into egg reproduction. And I'm like, yeah, that's what they do. And he's like, that's unbelievable. And it's like, I know. Explain it to the snake, like this. Luckily enough, it's in captivity and it's going to get its body weight back on and kick back on. But it's crazy. It's madness.
That is right. So that's our photos with you for the night. So what I'd like to do is go through, before we go any further, I'd like to go through and answer the pick of the week.